A wedding feast. He who has the bride is the bridegroom, but the friend of the bridegroom, who stands and hears him, rejoices greatly because of the bridegroom's voice. Therefore, this joy of mine is fulfilled. John 3:29. The engagement ceremony was the first essential step in marriage. During the festivities accompanying the engagement, which took place at the house of the bride's father, a contract would be written and signed by the groom and witnesses, outlining the economic and social obligations of the future husband to the bride. The groom would then seal the contract by giving the bride an item of value, which could be very modest. If the future bride was very young, engagements took place as young as 12 years of age, she could defer the move into the groom's home and the beginning of married life for several years. In any case, she was given at least 12 months to prepare her clothes and jewelry. The husband used this period to prepare the home as well as the festivities of the marriage itself. The wedding took place in the evening, when the bride was brought to the groom's house in a festive torchlight procession. A hint of this custom can be found in the words of Jesus. The kingdom of heaven be likened unto 10 virgins, which took their lamps and went forth to meet the bridegroom. Matthew 25:1. Beforehand, both bride and groom bathed and were anointed with aromatic oils and dressed in their finest clothes, saved especially for the occasion. The guests, too, wore their best attire. In fact, it was considered an insult to come improperly dressed. Matthew 22:11-12. Revelation 21:2 uses the phrase, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband, as a way to describe the unimaginable beauty of Jerusalem at the end of days. When the family and all the neighbors were gathered in the house or courtyard, a gala meal would begin. But before the meal, the guests would ritually purify themselves by washing their hands. This custom is reflected in John 2:6. Nearby stood 6 stone water jars, the kind used by the Jews for ceremonial washing. We know that at the meal the wine flowed freely. John 2:2-3. During the meal, poetry would be read and songs sung and gifts presented to the couple. Monetary remuneration was part and parcel of every betrothal negotiation. Divorce. Jesus' own views about divorce are set out in Mark 10:11-12. Whoever divorces his wife and marries another commits adultery against her. And if a woman divorces her husband and marries another, she commits adultery. The Mishnaic tractate called Gittin, Bills of Divorce, sets out the conditions for termination of a marriage. One view was that of the strict school of oral law that existed at Jesus' time, the school of Shammai, which said a man may not divorce his wife unless he has found unchastity in her. Mishnah Gittin 9:10. On the other hand, the more liberal school of Hillel, in a purposefully exaggerated expression designed to challenge the strict view, says, even if she spoilt a dish for him, Gittin 9:10. Ancient delicacies and daily bread. Now when he had brought them into his house, he set food before them, and he rejoiced, having believed in God with all his household. Acts 16:34. Among simple folk, people sat on the floor or on mats to take their meals, helping themselves to food placed in the center. But in a wealthy household, or at a festive meal, the guests reclined on a 3-sided divan, and the food would be brought by servants from side rooms. The host was seated second from the left, facing the open side of the table, with places of honor. Luke 14:7, reserved on either side of him. Matthew 20:21. At a simple meal, people used their pliable, wide, flat bread as both spoon and plate, scooping out food from the common large dishes. Bread would be dipped in vinegar as a spice. Leftover pieces of this bread, perhaps the crumbs which fell from the rich man's table of Luke 16:21, are thought to have served as a kind of napkin for wiping the fingers. Even in the remains of average homes in town or country, however, archaeologists have discovered quite a wide range of vessels, both for serving and for eating. One source tells of the weekly supply of food that a husband was required to supply his wife, a landlord his laborers, and the community to the poor: about 4.4 liters of wheat, 1 1/4 liters of lentils, 1/4 liter oil, and about 2.2 liters of dried figs or other fruit. Oranges and lemons were exotic. The groom might bring one to his bride. Sweets included honeycomb, Luke 24:42. For festivals and the Sabbath day, it was customary to offer as fine a menu as one could afford. Killing the fatted calf, Luke 15:27, was a sign that a festive meal was in preparation. Meat was consumed only on the Sabbath or festivals, and only rich people ate meat every Sabbath. The sages saw the purchase of special foodstuffs for holidays as a way of further advertising the celebration. When asked what food would differentiate the Sabbath from the weekday meal, one rabbi answered, a pie of fish, hash, and flour. Wine was a common beverage. It was used in a ritual context for celebrating the Sabbath, festivals, and to enhance other joyous occasions, as well as for the medicinal purposes. Often it was diluted with water, a practice which some experts have suggested helped disinfect the water from the diseases it was prone to in antiquity. Good local wine came from Samaria. The best imported was from Cyprus and Rhodes. Another popular drink was made from date juice and from lotus jujube. A menu and recipe for a typical festive meal. Salad, mint, rue, coriander, parsley, chives, green onion, lettuce, coleroot, thyme, carmint, green, fleabane, celery. Main course, roast lamb with hot mint sauce. Side dishes, chard made into salad with lentils and beans, mustard as a green vegetable, artichoke. Dessert, pear compote made with dried pears boiled in wine and water together with honey. Pomegranates could be served off season, example not in the summer or fall, because they had been placed in hot sea water until discolored and dried 3 days in the sun, then rehydrated by placing in cold fresh water overnight. Dried apples mixed with toasted sesame. Fishermen. And Jesus said unto them, Come ye after me, and I will make you to become fishers of men. Mark 1:17. Ancient stone anchors from the Sea of Galilee. Jesus' first disciples were fishermen, and so these words must have resonated deeply within them. There are many links between their daily work and the new task Jesus brought them. A skilled fisherman had to know that for different types of fish, different nets needed to be used. He understood that lack of teamwork could lose him his catch, and lack of patience could leave his nets empty. Choice of the right fishing grounds and sensitivity to nuances of wind, depth, and temperature had to be second nature to him in order to bring in the catch. Fishing is the backdrop for many a gospel story, and knowledge of the kind of nets used by Jesus' first fishermen disciples brings new understanding to these stories. There were 3 types of nets in use in the days of Jesus: the seine or drag net, the cast net, and the trammel net, usually made out of linen thread. Each type of net is mentioned in the Gospels in relation to a different kind of fishing. The dragnet. The dragnet was operated by 2 teams. One team took the net, which was like a wall some 100 feet long and 12 feet high and attached by ropes at each end. The bottom side of the net was weighted by sinkers. First, the boat made for the best fishing ground. In the Sea of Galilee, the warm springs of Tabgha on the north shore must have been a favorite of the disciples. One team alighted, holding one side of the net with thick ropes. The boat sailed out with the rest of the crew until the net was stretched and then circled back to shore at a distance that allowed the net to become fully spread. Then the other team took out the other rope. Both teams harnessed themselves to each end of the net and dragged it to shore. The dragnet was the longest and heaviest net used by Sea of Galilee fishermen and required a larger boat to maneuver it into place. The famed ancient Galilee boat may have been the type of boat used for this kind of work. A contemporary net. Ancient net weights. The cast net. When Jesus encountered Simon and Andrew, they were probably using the cast net, a circular net about 20 feet in diameter with weights attached to the bottom edge. The cast net could be thrown either from a boat or from the shoreline. With great skill, the fishermen folded the net over one arm in a manner that would allow it to open completely when it landed in the water and then descend like a parachute, trapping fish beneath it. To retrieve the cast net, the fishermen would dive into the water and pull the bottom of the net together carefully. Because the cast fisherman was required to jump into the water frequently to retrieve his net, his usual garb was nothing. In the story of the miraculous catch of fish in John 21, when Peter heard that Jesus was standing on the shore, he put on his outer garment, for he had removed it, and plunged into the sea. John 21:7. Let us not imagine Peter dressing himself fully before jumping into the water. Rather, he had probably just been preparing to dive into the water to retrieve his cast net when he heard that his teacher was waiting. Too anxious to wait until the boat reached the shore, he jumped into the water and swam the distance. Before jumping in, Peter put on the minimal amount of clothing necessary to appear respectfully before Jesus. Artist rendering of the Galilee boat. The trammel net. The trammel net was actually 3 nets in one. 2 large mesh walls about 5 feet high, in between which was sandwiched a net of finer mesh. The net would be piled into the boat and one end would be slipped into the sea. It would then be slowly pulled around by the boat until a circle, a kind of open-ended barrel, was created. The fish caught within would attempt to escape by pushing themselves against the larger inner net. They would find themselves entrapped in the finer mesh, and as they attempted to swim on, catching themselves in the larger mesh net. Jumping fish like the St. Peter's fish or tilapia could be caught by attaching a collar-like net on a reed frame around the top of the barrel. Each evening before the night's fishing began, and after every throw of the net, the fishermen extricated each fish from within the mesh, cleaning and mending the nets, as did James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Matthew 4:21. The ancient Galilee boat. In 1986, the outline of a wooden boat was discovered mired in the mud on the northwestern shore of the Sea of Galilee. By its shell-first, mortise and tenon method of construction, pottery vessels discovered with it, and the carbon-14 test, the boat could be conclusively dated to the 1st century CE. Its dating to one of the most important periods in the history of the Holy Land makes the vessel of unparalleled significance to both Christians and Jews. The 24 by 7 foot long craft, made of 7 different species of wood including cypress and cedar, seems to have been continuously repaired over many years by a master craftsman, but in the end was apparently abandoned on the shoreline. Its burial for 2,000 years in a muddy, anaerobic environment allowed for the extraordinary state of its preservation. After years of work to replace the water that clogged its wooden fibers with a wax-based substance, the boat is now on display in a special exhibition hall in Kibbutz Gennesaar, not far from the site where it was first discovered. Drawings and text based with permission on the research and publications of Mendel Nun Kibbutz Ein Gev. The Dragnet. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a dragnet that was cast into the sea and gathered some of every kind, which, when it was full, they drew to shore, and they sat down and gathered the good into vessels, but threw the bad away. Matthew 13:47-48. The trammel net. When he had stopped speaking, he said to Simon, "Launch out into the deep and let down your nets for a catch." But Simon answered and said to him, "Master, we have toiled all night and caught nothing. Nevertheless, at your word, I will let down the net." And when they had done this, they caught a great number of fish, and their net was breaking. So they signaled to their partners in the other boat to come and help them, and they came and filled both the boats so that they began to sink. Luke 5:1-7. The cast net. And as he walked by the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew his brother casting their nets into the sea, for they were fishermen. Mark 1:16.